Constance Kent entered the world as the fifth daughter and ninth child of Samuel Saville Kent, a stern inspector of factories for the Home Office, and his first wife, Mary Ann. Mary Ann herself was the daughter of Thomas Windus of Stamford Hill, London, a prosperous coachmaker, ensuring that Constance's early life was framed by both privilege and the weight of expectation. In the still hours between June 29th and June 30th, 1860, nearly 4-year-old Francis Saville Kent vanished from his family's home, Road Hill House, in the village of Road, at the time, then part of Wiltshire. By morning, the search ended in horror. The boy's small body was discovered in the stone vault of the property's privy house. He was still clad in his nightshirt and swaddled in a blanket. Knife wounds marked his chest and hands, and his throat had been cut so savagely that he was nearly decapitated. Suspicion fell on Francis's nursemaid, Elizabeth Gough, who was promptly arrested. But as the investigation unfolded, Detective Inspector Jack Witcher of Scotland Yard turned his attention to a different suspect, Francis's 16-year-old half-sister, Constance Kent. She was taken into custody on July 16th, yet released without trial. Public sentiment bristled at the notion that a working-class detective would accuse a young woman of upper class. With the case in tatters and scandal shadowing their name, the Kent family left Wiltshire for Wrexham. Constance was sent across the Channel to a finishing school in Dinan, France. 5 years after the murder, in 1865, Constance Kent was finally brought to trial. Her prosecution followed a private confession to Arthur Wagner, an Anglo-Catholic clergyman, in which she declared her intention to surrender herself to justice. Wagner helped her carry out the decision and testified before the magistrates about her statement. Yet, before speaking, he made it clear that he would reveal nothing beyond the confession itself, citing the sacred seal of sacramental confession. The magistrates pressed him lightly. After all, Constance wasn't contesting the charges. In her account, Constance described waiting until the household had fallen into deep sleep. She then unlatched the shutters and window in the drawing room, went into Francis's room, and lifted him from his cot, still wrapped in a blanket, taken from between the sheets, which she left undisturbed. Carrying him outside, she went to the privy house, where she had earlier hidden matches to light her way. There, using a razor stolen from her father, she killed the boy. The act, she implied, was deliberate, born of revenge rather than impulse, and some suggested she had long been prone to mental instability. From the beginning, however, many doubted her guilt. Rumors swirled that her father, Samuel Kent, a man with a history of infidelity, was the true killer. Some claimed he was having an affair with the nursemaid, Elizabeth Gough, and murdered Francis in a violent rage after an intimate encounter was interrupted. The theory fit an unsettling pattern. Years earlier, while his first wife, Mary Ann Kent, lay dying, Samuel had courted the family's nanny, Mary Drew Pratt, later marrying her. Pratt was Francis's mother. Suspicion of Samuel Kent was widespread, even shared by the novelist Charles Dickens. More than a century later, author Kate Summerscale revisited the case. She argued that if Constance's confession was false, it was not to protect her father, but her beloved brother, William Saville Kent. The two were deeply bonded, their closeness intensified by the neglect they felt after their father shifted his affections to the children of his second marriage. William had been a suspect during the original investigation, but was never charged. Summerscale suggested that if William was not solely responsible for Francis's death, he may have acted alongside Constance. Constance never withdrew her confession, not after her father's death, nor after William's. She never explained her motive, insisting only that she bore no hatred or jealousy toward her half-brother. Summerscale's conclusion was stark. Whether the killer was Constance, William, or both, the murder was an act of vengeance against their father, whose favorite child was said to be Francis. At the Devizes Assize Court, Constance Kent entered a plea of guilty, which the court accepted, meaning Arthur Wagner was not recalled to testify. His earlier stance before the magistrates, however, had already ignited heated debate in the press. Many voices expressed outrage at the notion that he might claim a right to withhold evidence from the state on the grounds he had given. The controversy over Arthur Wagner's refusal to disclose details of Constance Kent's confession reached the highest level of government, prompting questions in both houses of Parliament. In the House of Lords, Lord Westbury, the Lord Chancellor, responded by stating unequivocally that, in any civil or criminal proceeding, a clergyman of the Church of England had no legal privilege to refuse to answer a question on the grounds that it would reveal information received in confession. Such a question, he said, must be answered in the interest of justice. The law of England, he added, did not even grant this privilege to Roman Catholic priests when dealing with members of their own faith. Lord Westbury further noted that an order for Wagner's committal for contempt of court appeared to have been made, though it was never enforced. Constance Kent was initially sentenced to death, but the penalty was commuted to life imprisonment in recognition of her youth at the time of the crime and for her voluntary confession. She would spend the next 20 years in various prisons, including Millbank, before her release in 1885 at the age of 41. In early 1886, Constance Kent left England for Australia, joining her brother William in Tasmania, where he served as a government advisor on fisheries. Adopting the name Ruth Amelie Kay, she undertook nurse training at the Alfred Hospital in Prahran, Melbourne. Her career advanced quickly. She was appointed sister in charge of the female lazaret at the Coast Hospital in Little Bay, Sydney. From 1898 to 1909, she worked at the Parramatta Industrial School for Girls, before spending a year in the quiet township of Mittagong. In 1911, she became the matron of the Pierce Memorial Nurses' Home in East Maitland, a position she held with distinction until her retirement in 1932. In the summer of 1863, the bustling port city of Oslo was a hub of commerce and opportunity. Farmers from the countryside would make the long journey to sell their goods at the city's crowded markets. Among them was 36-year-old Knut Grote, a hard-working farmer from the scenic district of Lairdal. He had made the trip in late July, hauling several heavy barrels of freshly caught salmon to sell in the capital. The sales went well, and Knut was preparing his return home, unaware that he had caught the attention of two dangerous men. The very next day, Knut disappeared. No one had seen him leave the city, and his absence stirred concern. For an entire week, there was no sign of him, until the grim discovery of a body floating in the Oslo fjord. When the remains were pulled from the water, the truth was horrifying. Knut had been shot in the head, his throat viciously cut. The investigation soon uncovered a sinister plot. Two men, Prussian national Frederick Wilhelm Priest and Danish shoemaker Knud Christian Frederick Simonsen from Odense, had been living in Oslo for some time. Both were known to authorities as drifters who made their living through deception and petty crimes. On August 10th, Priest approached Knut with an offer. Pretending to be a sailor, he placed a large order of salmon and claimed his ship was anchored just offshore. He instructed Knut to bring the goods to the vessel that same day. Knut, trusting the man, agreed. That afternoon, Priest and Simonsen rented a small rowing boat. Later, they met Knut at the harbor. Together with the barrels of salmon, they pushed off into the calm waters, heading toward the island of Hodoya. But somewhere along the way, their intentions turned deadly. While still out on the fjord, the two men attacked. Knut was first shot in the head, then stabbed in the neck. With cold precision, they bound his body to a heavy stone, using rope from the rental boat, and heaved him overboard. The motive was as pitiful as it was brutal. They took only 140 spedidlers, the earnings from his salmon sales. By early 1864, the fate of Frederick Wilhelm Priest and Knud Christian Frederick Simonsen was sealed. After a sensational trial that gripped the city of Oslo, the Supreme Court delivered its verdict on February 10th. Both men were to be executed for the cold-blooded murder of Knut Grote. The ruling brought to a close months of investigation, but it also set the stage for one of the most public and dramatic executions in 19th century Norway. The date was set, April 19th, 1864. The chosen site was Ederstad, a known execution ground on the outskirts of the city. That morning, crowds began pouring in from the surrounding districts. By the time the hour approached, an estimated 5,000 people had gathered, men, women, and children, many dressed in their Sunday best, standing shoulder to shoulder in the crisp air, eager to witness justice being carried out. Public executions, while rare, were still considered both punishment and spectacle. At the center of it all was Samson Isberg, Norway's official executioner, a man whose grim profession was nearing its end. These 2 beheadings would be his final commissions in a long and infamous career. The first to face the scaffold was Priest. Standing beside him was priest Johann Hendrik Moni, tasked with offering the condemned man spiritual comfort in his final moments. Moni read aloud from the Epistle to the Romans, chapter 6, verse 23. "For the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life." The crowd fell silent as the solemn words carried over the field. When Moni began the Lord's Prayer, Isberg took his position. With a single practiced stroke of the axe, Priest's head was severed from his body. His remains were swiftly placed in a waiting coffin, and the scaffold was cleaned in preparation for the second execution. Next came Simonson. His escort to the scaffold was priest Jorgen Tanberg, who listened as the condemned man addressed the onlookers, speaking openly about his miserable life, a confession and warning intertwined. Tanberg then read from the first book of Genesis, chapter 9, verse 6. "Whoever sheds human blood, by humans shall their blood be shed." As before, the Lord's Prayer was recited. When Tanberg reached the final words, Isberg stepped forward. In one decisive motion, Simonson's head fell, marking the end of both the man and the executioner's career.